Lesson 2.6, Number Properties. The commutative property. The commutative property can be used for addition or multiplication. What it says is that you can add numbers of a sum in any order. So again, you can add numbers in any order. It's important to remember this word, any order. Same thing with multiplication. You can multiply factors in any order. The example is 4 plus negative 9. That answer, different signs so you subtract, is negative 5. If I switch them, so I put the negative 9 first, then added 4, it's still going to get you the same answer of negative 5. So again, you can add, like 5 plus 2 equals 7, which is the same thing as 2 plus 5. Does not matter the order, you can add in any order. Same with multiplication. 3 times negative 7 is negative 21. Or if negative 7 is first and then multiply by 3, it's still negative 21. So you can switch the numbers around and it'll have the same answer. Example 1. You have a summer babysitting job. You babysit 5 days a week. You work 9 hours each day, earning $4 per hour. What is your weekly pay? Use a verbal model, which is putting words and symbols to the equation. To find your weekly pay, you need to take your hourly rate, which is $4 per hour, times the number of hours you worked each day, which is 9, times the number of days that you work in a week. 4 times 9 times 5. To make this problem easier to solve, because I'm sure you're thinking, well, I'm just going to do 4 times 9. Sure, you could do it this way, and you're going to end up with 36, but then you need to do 36 times 5. That will work. You do not have to use the commutative property. However, it's going to make it easier so you don't have to do any work on the side. You can do it in your head. 4 and 5 are going to multiply together to make a nice number of 20. Why do we like 20? Because it ends in a 0. And any number that ends in a 0 is easier to work with. So I'm going to switch the 9 and the 5. So all I did was move the 5 to where the 9 used to be and the 9 where the 5 used to be. That's commutative property. Now you can multiply, which is 20, and then multiply 20 times 9. And again, you shouldn't have to come over here and do it on the side of your paper. Because when there's a 0 at the end, just do 2 times 9, which is 18, and add that 0 at the end. That's something you should be able to do in your head. Remember, the first way up here would have been to take 36 times 5. And now that might involve a little bit more math that you have to write out. And the unit result is the fact that it's the weekly pay, which means it would have to be dollars, because it wouldn't make sense to be weekly pay to be 180 hours. It's your pay, so it's dollars. Here's another example. Negative 63 plus 38 minus 17. Two sides to this problem. First of all, let's change our subtractions to adding the opposite. Remember, you never want to see subtraction anymore unless you're actually subtracting two numbers. You want to change all your subtractions to adding the opposite. Let's look at the end of these numbers. 3, 8, and 7. You either want to look for what's going to make it easier to solve, and if you look down here at this bubble, that's what it says. When deciding what numbers to add or multiply first, look for pairs whose sum or products, when you add or multiply, ends in a 0, because multiples of 10 are easier to work with. So first of all, they did change the adding the opposite, and now between 3, 8, and 7, what is going to make 10? Well, these are both negative, so when I add those negatives, 3 and 7, that's going to make a 10. So I'm going to switch the negative 38 with the negative 17. Now I should be able to do 63 plus 17. They're both negative, so I just add. There's that 0. 6 plus 7, 6 plus 1 is 8, and it's negative 80. Bring down the 38. Now it's different signs, so you subtract. This should be a little bit easier to see because you borrow and that becomes a 10. So what you have is an answer of negative, because 80 is the bigger absolute value, 42. Use the commutative property to evaluate 1, 2, and 3. That means to solve the problem. That means I want to rearrange the numbers so that first thing you add or multiply ends in a 0. Pause the video at this time. For number 1, I'm going to switch the 7, negative 7, and the 4. So now when I do 5 times 4, that's 20. And I can easily do 2 times 7, which is 14, add the 0. Different signs, the answer is negative 40. First thing I always want to do is change subtraction to adding the opposite. So now I'm going to put my 2 positive answers together, and then at the end I'll add on my negative. 56 plus 64, 4 plus 6 is 10, carry the 1, 6 plus 5 is 11, plus 1 is 120. Now add negative 115, different signs, so when you set it up, you should realize that it is positive 5. Number 3, did you change your subtraction to adding the opposite? Adding the opposite. Rearrange using commutative property. Why am I putting the 91 next to the 71? Because this is different signs, which means I'm going to subtract. And 91 minus 71, well, the 1's become 0. 9 minus 7 is 2. Positive, because 91 has a bigger absolute value. And now add negative 32. It is different signs, so you will have to subtract. Keep the negative because 32 is a bigger absolute value. You might be asking yourself, why do I need to use this then? It looks like I could just do it left to right. You can. This is just to make it easier to solve. The associative property is for addition and multiplication. And what it says is that when you change the grouping of numbers, it will not change the sum. And again, same thing, when you change the grouping of the factors, it will not change the product. That means I could put parentheses, and the parentheses, you would always do those operations first, around other numbers when I'm adding all the numbers or when I'm multiplying all the numbers, and it will not change the answer. 1 plus 3 is 4. Add 6, the answer is 10. What if instead of 1 plus 3 first, I do 3 and 6? 3 and 6 is 9. 9 plus 1 is also 10. Grouping it together is not going to change the problem. By the way, I remember associative property because of the word associate or associate. Associate is a co-worker, and so these numbers are working together. They're associating with each other, and I remember that as being parentheses because these two numbers are working together. They're associating with each other. So if you need to identify the property, look for the parentheses and look that the numbers are different in each parenthesis. Same thing will work in multiplication. You can change the grouping of the numbers. Here it's 8 times 2, which is the same thing as doing 2 times 4. Again, it has to be all multiplying in the problem. For example, example 3, let's use the associative property. Okay, here's parentheses. -5/8 plus 10. Oh, fractions. So, it may be a little more difficult to add a whole number with a fraction. So let's group the fractions together instead. Now, because they have a common sign, it's pretty easy to solve. The common sign stays just that, 8, and now you just add 8 plus -5. Well, 5 plus 3 is 8. They're both negative, so it's -8. Simplify that. They're the same number, so it's 1. Different signs, so it's -1. Now add 10, which is subtracting, and you get 9. See how that made it a little bit easier? Otherwise, you're going to have to find a common denominator between 8 and the 1 that's underneath the whole number 10. And that's just going to be more work. Example 4. I'm going to change it so that the 6 and the 5 are next to each other. What do we call that property? When we are moving the 5 place and the 9 place. So you're switching it around. That is called commutative property. Now, I'm going to group the 6 and the 5 together. Why do I do that? Because 6 times 5 is going to be easier to solve. It ends in a 0. That's associative property, where I'm grouping them differently. 30 times 9, all you have to do is 3 times 9, which is 27. Add the 0, 270 is your answer. Okay, at this point you need to evaluate, or again solve, the expressions using mental math. They want you to try to do it where you're not writing a whole bunch of work on the paper. So make sure you use commutative property, and if you remember, the commutative property can be in any order, so you can move the numbers so that they're in any order, or the associative property, which means that you are grouping them differently. Grouping different. Pause the video and try 4, then hit play so you can check your answer. Then try 5, and so on. Number 4. You can see that I automatically think, oh, 5 and 5 when I add is 10. So I'm going to use the commutative property to reorder my numbers. And then I'm going to group the first 2 together, that's the associative property, and I'm going to add those. 5 plus 5 is 10, carry the 1, 2, 3, 4, 40. Now add -46, different signs, so you should subtract. Answer is -6, because 46 is bigger. Number 5, let's add the opposite. Ooh, you have a -37 and a 37. I'm going to put those next to each other because they're the same number, just opposites, which means that you should know that that's 0. Now bring down this -82, and you should have -82. Okay, this is all multiplication. I know it looks like this -5 is not multiplying, but the invisible sign next to parentheses means multiplication. It's just that the 9 and the 40 is grouped in parentheses first. I'm actually going to change it so that I am grouping the 40 with the 5. Why is that going to be better? Because 5 times 4 is 20, add the 0, and different signs negative. And now I can just do 9 times 2, which is 18, add the 2 zeros at the end, different signs is negative. For number 7, I would group the first 2 numbers together first because it has a denominator of 3 and this has a numerator, because there's a 1 underneath, of 1. This actually can multiply straight across, -6 over +3, bring down the 14, and that simplifies to -2 times 14, which is 28. Here, put the fractions together. Just add the top. That becomes 1 plus 10, which is 11. And then anything times 0, no matter, it doesn't matter what this is, because when you multiply by 0, it's 0.